So in the world of John Stuart Mill, I exist in my own little bubble, all by myself, and the space in between is filled by society. No one can interfere with my autonomy. The only way society can limit me is if I hurt you. So the functions of society or government come down to two: an army for defense and redress, fixing a harm where it has occurred. Don't tax me. Don't tell me what to do. Don't tell me where to park. Don't tell me to wear a mask. Don't tell me to get vaccinated. Don't tell me I can't take drugs. Don't tell me I can't be obese. Don't tell me anything. Leave me alone. Get out of my life. That's what it comes down to. Now, one caveat. You could argue that Mill's position was more moderate. I'm going to bracket that because this is the way we hear John Stuart Mill now. In fact, can you think of someone in Congress who says exactly this every time, every day? His initials are RP. Rand Paul. And if you think about the overall Republican position, this is it. All right. Any questions?
How are they
No.
explicitly
I'm sorry, Joshua. How are they?
how are they explicitly defining harm? Because many of the things that they claim is an imposition on them is directly harming others, but they don't seem to see that or care.
They don't, because no one else matters. I'm the
But
center of my universe.
There's the tacit representation of some care for other people and the recognition that harm can be done to them. So do they not recognize that they can cause harm to others?
No, because ultimately the Republicans are going to come down on the side of social Darwinism. This was part of the last lecture. In the end, it's all about survival of the fittest. So even in society, there's no cooperation because we're all competing all the time. Their model assumes conflict and competition, not cooperation.
So basically, the state exists to protect me from you, but not you from me.
Yeah, basically. Yep. And the only difference between the Republicans and the Democrats is that the Democrats are essentially saying, We all deserve to be hedonists. So how can we create a society in which we're all hedonists? Bottom line. Do you see my point?
Yes. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. Sorry.
Go ahead. Question?
Just that, I mean, personally, I view that society that, has been outlined of the I and then society in between as just like American society as a whole rather than just Republican versus Democrat or liberal versus, conservative.
Yeah, we're inherently selfish. I just finished an essay on reforming the healthcare system. And again, I don't want to go too far down here because I don't want to keep you all night. But I have long been a proponent of but now I'm not so sure. Why do you think I'm not sure? Oh, we have a chat. Let's see. Okay, that's fine. And make sure that I mark you present, okay? Take care, Nima. Why do you think I've changed my position on it?
Thank you, Professor. You too.
Thank you. Why do you think I've changed my position?
I'm not sure.
Because there's a strong possibility that I won't have to be responsible. Somewhere between 70 and 75% of the American population is chronically obese. Yet we refuse to get a grip on our diet. Stroke, heart attack, diabetes, and more. If we won't take responsibility for it now, if it's free, are we going to take responsibility at all? I'm not so sure. Put it in terms of COVID. I'm not going to wear a mask. I'm going to get infected, and I'm going to expect you to take care of me. And if I don't have health insurance because it's too expensive, tough shit. You're going to take care of me anyway, and that cost will be absorbed by everybody else. Do you see my point? If that Baconator makes me feel good, you're not going to tell me to not eat it. And you're not going to ever convince me that my being obese is hurting you. Well, it is. And you're not wearing a mask is hurting me. And you're not getting vaccinated is hurting me. Do you see my point?
Yes.
Okay. So by making healthcare free, we are not fixing the problem. You get away without fixing the harm you have caused. All right? Any questions? Okay. All of these issues are behind McIntyre's book, After Virtue. McIntyre blames it all on a 19th century philosopher, Friedrich Nietzsche, and says that ultimately the choice is Aristotle or Nietzsche. And McIntyre says, without a doubt, we got to choose Aristotle. Except, to choose Aristotle is to go back in history almost 2,600 years. What McIntyre misses is that while he is right about the concept of arete, while he's right about the concept of social responsibility, in the world of Aristotle, if your father is a blacksmith, you are a blacksmith. If you're born a woman, that's it. You're done. And the research I did for my book, which I finished last year, every time I find myself dealing with the question of racism in the late 19th century, the most quoted person, other than the Bible, is Aristotle. And typically, when they refer to Aristotle, they refer to his book, The Politics. Aristotle is very clear in The Politics. To be human, you must be Greek and you must be male. Poor women should never have more than 2 children. If they get pregnant for a 3rd time, whether they want it or not, there'll be an abortion. If they get pregnant again after that, and God forbid, or the deity of your choice, any child born with birth defects is taken outside the city and left to die. Is this the world we want?
Sounds like The Handmaid's Tale.
Yeah, very much. Yeah. The fundamental problem, beyond being Greek and male, equaling human, is the fact that you are who your father was. In other words, your identity is defined by your job, by your role in society. Is that what we want? sounds pretty bleak to me. Questions, reactions, thoughts before we talk about Nietzsche?
I mean, that last part, your role in society, your job, like the hierarchy, if you think of a doctor versus a stripper, everyone's going to say the doctor's a good person, they're this or that. But and that's just going off of the role. The doctor could be the most corrupt, awful, evil person, and the stripper could be the most amazing human being ever and whatever. But I just think that there's a lot of elements here that I feel like are within our society, like specifically the job thing, like how we have a hierarchy for that of who's considered a better person based off of that.
Yes. Yeah. And not only that, but if you're going to be a blacksmith or a plumber, your only real option in life is to continue to be the best plumber you can be. And because your father was a plumber, you're going to be a plumber. Now, again, we can argue that this is somewhat of a wooden interpretation of what McIntyre was saying. But it's very much true to his argument. Going back in history has never fixed anything. And this is not ancient Greece.
Why is there a
Go ahead.
Why is there a necessity to take the whole thing as a package deal, or setting it up as this dichotomy of Aristotle or Nietzsche without providing an alternative? Like, why can't we take the best of the past and leave the baggage behind?
Well, that's a great observation, Josh. And part of the problem is that McIntyre embodies certain prejudices that are inherent in Western culture. We have inherited the racism and sexism of Aristotle. This is in large part why we are where we are. Except that with utilitarianism, Western morality collapses. And we end up with a society that's totally focused on me. So what McIntyre should be critical of is John Stuart Mill and Jeremy Bentham, not Nietzsche. But part of the problem is that in the 19th century, Nietzsche represents the rebirth of Plato. So think about it this way. You may have heard that philosophy is love of wisdom. At one level, that's right. But that's not what Plato is talking about. When you parse the word, when you go back to the original ancient Greek, when you break that up and you look at the etymology, it is the passion to create. And the principal passion for Plato is the creation of a just and equitable society. In the 19th century, when Nietzsche comes along, the phrase that he used was this: Villa zu Markt. His sister was an anti-Semite, and when he died, she edited a lot of his works. The will to power, Villa zu Markt became, in her use of the phrase, the will to power, which became synonymous with Nazism. This is not what Nietzsche was talking about. When you parse the German, Wille zu machen is the passion to create. So Nietzsche argued that whatever is done from love always occurs beyond good and evil. Nietzsche will argue that the very concepts of good and evil are what is oppressive. To truly love another human is to transcend the categories of good and evil. And interestingly, when I love you, I cease to be selfish. Nietzsche's concept of love gets picked up in the 20th century by Martin Heidegger. And we'll look more closely at this another time. The concept is Sorg. Sorg does not have a single translation into English. It means love, care, compassion, kindness, concern. I don't need good and evil to know what it means to love, to care, to be compassionate, to show kindness, and to show concern. All I need to do is to be human. In the few minutes that are left, we're going to talk about Heidegger. We're going to come back briefly to Albert Camus and finish up by contrasting what Nietzsche really said versus what MacIntyre wants us to believe Nietzsche said. So Heidegger said that we are born at a time we do not choose, We die at a time we do not choose. And at some point in the course of our lives, we discover that we are thrown towards death. This is the only fact of human life. From the moment we are born, we are old enough to die. And the older we are, the closer death is. Heidegger says that in the face of the paradox of death, paradoxical because we are born to die, but death is the end of us. Our reaction to death, to our own most possibility, to thrownness towards death, Heidegger calls angst. Angst is far deeper and far more profound than simply anxiety. A couple summers ago, I was making a left-hand turn. I was stopped. I waited for a car coming down the hill towards me to go by me, and I could see on my left a huge SUV stopped at the stop sign. As I made my left-hand turn, the woman driving the SUV shot out of the stop sign, apparently never bothered to look to see if I was there. And as her SUV was about to come through my car and crush me, that feeling of terror, that cold sweat, that sense that you're going to vomit your life out of your mouth, that sense that, oh my God, this is the moment when I'm going to be killed, that is angst. Heidegger said that we have two choices, one of which is denial and despair, and the other is Sorg. Nietzsche would say, we live in a life-negative culture. We live in a world of denial and despair. The only way in which I can truly love you, the only way in which I can truly make moral decisions, is to engage the world with Sorg. To love in a world in which all that is human dies. And that is the answer to the human question. I am human when I love in a world in which all things die. Albert Camus, who picks this up from Heidegger and Nietzsche, that's an M, let's write that again, calls this the logic of the absurd. Aristotle's not the answer, and Nietzsche is not the problem. The problem is John Stuart Mill, utilitarianism, which comes from Aristotle. The problem is hedonism. The problem is selfishness. The problem is that I only think about me. And if we go back to one of the points we made very early in the class, because we still exist in the 17th century, intellectually, emotionally, spiritually, than on the technology and the science front. The only moral imperative we recognize is this: in a couple of weeks, when we talk about technology and joblessness, you're going to read a paper from MIT which says that by 2038, 80% of the population will not earn enough money to survive. The myth has always been that each generation of new technology will create at least as many jobs as it will eliminate. No. The MIT analysis is based on the fact that in 2011, for the first time, the number of people employed went down while the gross domestic product went up. Raise the minimum wage to $15 and watch what happens. Number one, the last time we raised the minimum wage, inflation over a 6-year period was 25%. So in 3 years, the minimum wage increase will be wiped out. Secondly, since businesses can replace humans with technology very quickly and easily, that's what's going to happen. It's been happening aggressively since 1960. At one point, AT&T had over 150,000 operators. At one point, there were over 19,000 elevator operators in this country. Raise the minimum wage, and the average Wendy's will go from 17 people per shift to potentially as few as 3. It's no accident that kiosks are popping up in McDonald's and you're being pressured subtly to use the app to buy your food. That is designed to eliminate jobs. Until we begin to realize that we're in this together, that what's at stake is not money for the sake of money, or knowledge for the sake of knowledge, or whatever happens to make me happy tonight. Until we pass that point, the danger from new technology is severe. Questions, comments, thoughts?
I think, I work, a minimum wage job. I work at Starbucks, actually. I see a lot of implications of just total lack of humanity over profit, which I'm sure a lot of people experience in their jobs as well. But I just always wonder about people like Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk or even Oprah Winfrey and all these people who have just more money than they could ever dream of. I wonder, will there ever be a time where something steps in or happens where there's a cap on the amount of like the 1% and how much they can have versus the greater good for all the people? Like, I know that question's kind of all over the place, but I just wonder how much longer people can have like an abundance, but it's only at the very, very top versus, the rest of the world.
Well, Athena, part of the problem is that we have no sense of the common good. Number two, coming out of the 19th century, the assumption is that the more money you have, the more valuable you are. This was the whole thing behind what was called trickle-down economics. If we make all those rich people richer, then all of us po folk are going to do better when the crumbs fall off their table. According to the social Darwinism of the 19th century, if you have money, you are best of breed. The rest of us can go off and die. This is fundamentally why we regard socialism as an obscenity. Because the argument is that by aiding the weak, we're taking resources against the rich, away from the rich, who are the ones who are the best of breed. And as we mentioned in a past lecture, Sumner, at the end of the 19th, early 20th century, came right out and said, shut off the city water, shut down the city sewer, do not educate them, don't give them health care, feed them enough to keep them alive, and let them work in the factories until they die. That's the American way. As I've said a number of times, nothing is new. We're playing the same hand over and over. That's exactly what Aristotle said. In a world in which people who have money are considered best of breed, are considered the ones who should have children versus the rest of us, socialism will always be an obscenity. And if you think about it, the American economy nearly collapsed in 1960 as a result of the Marshall Plan. We shifted away from manufacturing to a consumer service economy. The hallmark of this a consumer-based economy is driven by debt. There is no more effective method of social control than putting people into debt. And in addition to that, as Harvey Cox pointed out in his book, The Secular City, we have equated with freedom, missing the fact that any form of self-objectification, any form of objectification is oppression. It's also dehumanizing. And yet we do it all the time, specifically with women in our culture. The net effect since 1960 is that we have reduced humans to a commodity. Yeah, sex trafficking has always been a problem. It's an epidemic right now. Why is it an epidemic? Because in the modern world, humans are a commodity, especially women. And there's no mechanism to stop it. Not through Aristotle, not through John Stuart Mill. No. Do you see my point?
Yes.
Okay. Are there any other questions or comments? All right. The last comment I want to make before I let you go, I actually have to take attendance. All forms of technology have social consequences. As we begin in the next few weeks to look at technology's social consequences, we're going to keep asking ourselves the question, why? Why? And what kind of a world are we creating? All right, let me take attendance.